I'll sow some cover crops and not have some cash crops there. It's something similar.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's even a good way to start.
Yeah, that we at least have like a good way to like that the start a project that's functioning, and then later on we'll see how it develops and the future of it.
Yeah. All right, we're live, man. We're live on
Okay.
YouTube.
Nice.
So let's just get an intro going before we head right into it.
Yeah.
What's up, everyone in YouTube? This is a bit of a special live that we're doing here with Peter. We are going to dive into his soil analysis results. He's preparing for a project here in Brazil. I'm going to ask you to explain a bit about your project in a bit.
Yeah.
And we will he took the soil samples. We even had some problems with the samples, right? With the first results, which were quite odd. And then I asked him to ask for the lab to redo them. But now we finally have the results, and we're gonna dive into it and see. I'm gonna help him interpret them and get a bit of an idea for a foundation fertilization in for the crops he wants to produce. So Peter, while you I'm gonna open the file.
Yeah.
Why don't you in the meantime explain a bit about the project, where it is in Brazil, and what your plan is?
The farm is located around 200 kilometers north of Sete Lagoas in the province of Minas Gerais, and we're gonna start a coffee business. So the system gonna be focused on coffee production, and besides the coffee production of the first implementation of 2 hectares, we also plan to do a 2-hectare system for vegetable production. So the coffee system will be a grid of 3-meter wide spaced tree rows, and then the vegetable system with a focus on okra production and also secondary curcuma. That's going to be used with a inter-row
secondary spacing. What?
Secondary, like first one, the vegetable is going to be okra, and secondary will be curcuma. Or açafrão da terra.
Oh, okay. Right.
So, and then we will use those simpler cash crops as a first cash influx in the system to get it viable from the start. But the system is going to be a 3-meter wide spaced coffee production system with the inter-rows every 3 meters. We had 3 rows every 3 meters, and the vegetable system is going to be more or less the same density, more or less the same linear way, but with the inter-rows being 5 meters and every 6 meters a 3-row. That's going to be majorly just bananas and Clericidia and Moringa, just for biomass production to get good coverage on the vegetable production.
All right, very cool. And tell people about the preparations, when you're planning to start. When do you think it's going to start actually the planting?
Yeah, I'll be arriving in Brazil at the beginning of October, and then during the first weeks of October, we'll try to do all the soil amendments while preparing the soil, and then at the end of October, we'll plan to have as much plants already in the ground and as much of the irrigation already installed. Because of the scale of the project, it's not going to be viable to use already pre-existing mulch. So we'll also use pigeon pea and other species like also in the system for the implementation. First, we also not going to use like it's like using a lot of examples like maize as the first immersion species, but we'll use the cash crop will eventually also produce. So we're going to use the okra also as the first emergent layer while the system is establishing.
In the coffee system.
Yeah, in the coffee system. So like we're first.
So you're gonna have a separate one. You're gonna have a separate one specifically for vegetables, and you're gonna be recycling
we're gonna,
vegetables.
Eventually, it's gonna be eventually it's gonna be separate. But just we're gonna when we're trying to install it, we'll first sow the okra in the coffee system, and then later on we'll sow it again. We'll try to maybe sow maize in the vegetable system just to implement the 3 rows, and then some soil, some cover crops in between, a mix of Crotalaria probably, and other cowpeas potentially in the vegetable system. And then secondary, like more or less 3 months in the establishment of the coffee system, we'll plan on to sow in the 3 rows, in the developing 3 rows, cutting back the available biomass, and then sowing there again the okra, so that we can establish a succession of the production itself. And then after that, 3 months after, so like when the okra in the coffee system will finish its production, we'll sow in between the first few lines of interrows in the vegetable production system with the vegetable consortium, so that we'll start as soon as possible with the production of a viable cash crop.
All right, cool. Now one question, because I imagine that in the 2 hectares that you're going to be doing vegetables, you're going to be I forgot the word in English, but you're going to be like timing the plant. You're not going to plant everything at once, right? You're going to have modules.
Yeah.
Are you going to do the same in the coffee system?
In the coffee, no. In the interrows of the coffee system, we're only going to use a mixture of already mixed Mombasa with also sorghum, also Estilosanges and Crotalaria, to already get a cover crop going, and then mowing it again. So with the Mombasa being like a secondary, more future
I need to recommend that you drop the Mombasa then.
Okay, later on in implementing it.
No. I'd recommend that you change Mombasa to a shorter panicum, and then we have one which is Masai. It's also a panicum, right? It's the same species, it's just a different variety. The thing is, Mombasa, we always have to think about problems in management, right? And if you lose the cut for the Mombasa grass, it's gonna swallow your coffee plant very easily. And then Masai doesn't, because it's shorter. And yeah, it produces a bit less biomass than Mombasa, but it's one of those things. I've met so many people that haven't been able to manage Mombasa that I've been recommend that people use for coffee plants, because coffee plants are small, right? Of course, if you're using bigger trees, if you're doing avocado and other things, then it's fine. But for coffee plants, I've been recommending that because the risk is just too big. There's gonna be 1 year, even if you have perfect management, there's gonna be eventually you're gonna miss a week, 2 weeks, because the brush cutter is gonna be broken or anything. Something's gonna happen, and you're not gonna be able to do it, and then you might have a big problem because of that. Anyway, I just wanted to find out.
No, that's
I was
really important.
I was talking about the okra that you're gonna be planting in the coffee rows, because you're gonna be planting the coffee rows, right?
Yeah.
The okra. Are you gonna be is that going to be modulated as well, or are you just going to plant 2 hectares of okra at once with the coffee?
No, that's also just going to be all at once to maybe to make it easier to sow. We could, like, if it could be, no, or we might like use like intersow, this use like a bigger spacing in between the different okras and use maize would also be an option. But my first thought now was to make it, to not overcomplicate it and just use okra seeds, and then get a little bit of, like, to have more plants already available while establishing the system. And because it's going to be our first try at producing them, I think that to already have a sufficient amount of production viable for selling and getting a little bit of revenue, it might be a better idea to just stick with the okra as the first emergent one, and to get as much experience with producing it.
Okay, I get it. The thing is, it's going to be a lot of okra for you to sell at once. I was just wondering, because it's probably possible for you to divide it into 4 modules. Just an idea that maybe you could do. You divide it in 4 modules, and you plant it like 1 every 2 weeks. Because then you can plant the coffee all at once.
Yeah.
But then the okra you can plant afterwards by seedling, for example. Because then it might be easier for you to enter the market. Of course, you have to consider who's going to be buying for you. If you already have a buyer, how much the buyer needs and how much your weekly production needs to be. But I would consider dividing it into 2 or 4, and then you do it every couple of weeks. So you plant all of the coffee, then you plant 1/4 of the okra. A couple of weeks from now, you plant another 1/4 of the okra. A couple of weeks from then, because the coffee is still going to be small, so it's not a big problem.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
No, that's a good point.
Oh, the dog is.
Yeah.
Let me share the screen here. Can you see the sample?
Yeah.
All right. So this is the typical soil analysis result. In Brazil, it's a bit different from the United States. I don't know in Europe how it is, and in Australia and other parts. But the units are different. But I know that in the States they use a lot of, they already consider pounds per acre of each element. Here in Brazil, we use 2 main units, which is milligrams per cubic decimeter. There's a direct correlation between this and kilograms per hectare, which would be the same as pounds per acre. Not the same value, but I mean the same idea. And then we have this one, which is centimole of charge by cubic decimeter, which considers it's used for calcium, magnesium, sometimes potassium and aluminum. And this is in regard to the charges, to the ionic charges or the electrical charges of the element, right? So it's basically counting how many charges of the CEC are or rather how many charges of calcium you have in the soil. So like each calcium ion has 2 charges. So for every 1 atom of calcium, we're gonna have 2 of these charges. That's just so people have an idea of, if they're not used to this unit, it's in terms of the amount of charges that we have in the soil. And calcium has 2 positive charges, magnesium has 2 positive charges, aluminum has 3 positive charges, and then hydrogen has 1 positive charge. So here's how we're gonna do this. We have we basically have three main areas that we're gonna. Let me get my spotlight here. We're basically gonna look at 3 different groups of attributes. First, we're gonna look into the attributes that will dictate whether or not we're gonna use some sort of soil amendment, such as lime, gypsum, or rock dust, for example. And for that, we need to check the pH. We need to check the aluminum concentration, calcium and magnesium concentration, the CEC, which is this one, of the soil, and then the base saturation for the soil. So this V here is the base saturation. It basically means how much of the soil CEC, which is here, right, 9.7, is occupied by potassium, calcium, and magnesium. This potassium, calcium, and magnesium are the basis of the soil, like they're the basic elements. So this tells us how much of it is occupied by calcium, magnesium, and potassium. So we have 56% of saturation of calcium, magnesium, and potassium. The rest is occupied by aluminum and hydrogen. So this is one attribute that we have to take a look into. And then this M here is the aluminum saturation, which is how much of the CEC of the soil is occupied by aluminum. And these two, they're very often used to determine the amount of lime that you need. Many crops, or all of the crops, they're going to have a reference value for M, which goes from 5% to 25%. So the most demanding crops, such as vegetables and many fruits, they're going to have a maximum of 5% of aluminum saturation that they tolerate. And coffee, which is a plant which likes acidic soils, it tolerates up to 25% of aluminum saturation. So looking at this, we like for neutralizing aluminum, we wouldn't have to use any lime. That's a fact. There's no need to neutralize aluminum here in this soil. So for that, we wouldn't need it. Then the second thing we have to look is how much, what the value of the base saturation is. And there is an ideal value for all the crops, which varies usually from 50 to 80, depending on the crop. Coffee has an ideal value of 60%. So we're very close to it. So to increase base saturation also, we wouldn't need to use any lime. The next thing we need to look at is the levels of calcium and magnesium, and if they're acceptable. We usually want at least 2 of calcium and 0.7 of magnesium, 0.7, 0.8 of magnesium. So you can see that yours is a lot higher. Like calcium is pretty abundant in the soil, and magnesium is on the limits, but it's still pretty decent. So in order to elevate calcium and magnesium also, there would be absolutely no need. And your pH is pretty high as well, 6.4. And coffee is very sensitive to micronutrient deficiency, right? And what if you go past pH 6.5, you very often start having problems with iron and manganese, zinc and copper deficiency. So I wouldn't do any liming here in the soil at all. No lime, no rock, dust, no nothing. I might consider adding a bit of magnesium sulfate to raise the magnesium level a little bit. Let me check something else here. I want to know how much of this base saturation is occupied by magnesium. So I have 0.7. Oh, let me do this in the computer calculation so you guys can check it out. So I'm going to calculate how much of the CEC is occupied by magnesium alone, right? We know that 56% is potassium plus calcium plus magnesium. Let's see how much of it is magnesium alone. So I have 0.771, and I'm going to divide it by 9.7. Yeah, so I have 8%. 8%. And then let's see calcium. 72 divided by 9.7. 50%. Yeah, calcium levels are perfect. Magnesium could be up a little bit. So I'll definitely add some magnesium sulfate to increase the levels of magnesium. Or if you're going to use, and you probably will, you're probably going to use magnesium thermophosphate as your phosphorus source. That already has magnesium, so that you're probably good for that. All right, so for soil amending, we already have decided that there's no need. If you have any question in the while I'm talking, you can just enter it. All right.
Yeah, I know. Like I'm trying to follow and to also like write down. I know this is live and this also records, so I can look back on it. But it's better to just like use it as like a teachable moment and just try to get it all in my head. But
all
all
right.
Yeah.
Cool. So next thing we're gonna do is go into the macronutrients other than calcium and magnesium, right? The macronutrients that we have here: phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. We've already addressed calcium and magnesium when calculating lime requirements. Now we're gonna address phosphorus and potassium. And the way to do that is they have to be done separately. You can see that we have two phosphorus attributes here, right? We have the actual phosphorus quantity, and then we have this, which is remaining phosphorus. This remaining phosphorus value, this is just it's a value that we use to estimate the capacity of the soil to hold phosphorus, right? Because tropical soils, acidic soils, they hold a lot of phosphorus. And the more clay there is, usually the more phosphorus it's gonna hold and then not make it available to plants directly. So this is a value that we use to estimate. And then the soil phosphorus interpretation, I can actually show it to you. Is based on, I need to use both phosphorus values to interpret it. This remaining phosphorus is also used for interpreting sulfur values and zinc values. Let me just open here the table. So you okay, here it is. So for example, this is a table for interpreting phosphorus available, right? So I have here, we should focus in this part of the table here. We have values of remaining phosphorus. Yours is 16, right? 16.17, that's it. Where is it? So it's going to be in this line here. So anything less than 6 is very low. From 6 to 8 is low. From 8 to 11, medium or average. 11 to 17 is good, and over 17 is very good. So ideally, you want to get to this part eventually, right? To a value higher than 11. Then, if your remaining phosphorus was low, the interpretation would be different, right? If you had 2 remaining phosphorus, for example, you would already have 4.2. It would be low, but it would be very close to getting to average. So it's always important. And then the other way to interpret it, if you don't have the remaining phosphorus value, is through the clay content of the soil. But this is a more accurate value, right? People are gradually dropping the soil interpretation based on clay and interpreting it based on remaining phosphorus. All right, so we have low phosphorus. And now we need to interpret potassium. You have 258 potassium. And we need 120 to be very good. So you're over the top with potassium. There'd be no need at all to use potassium fertilizer. It's pretty good soil, man. Pretty good soil. So we need to fertilize for phosphorus. We don't need to fertilize it for potassium. So that's a couple of things already that we have. And now we're going to look at micronutrients. Zinc, copper, iron, and manganese. They didn't provide boron, right? You should, I'll probably just recommend that you fertilize with boron because it's always deficient in Brazilian soils. So we have 0.773 zinc, which is low. We want to have at least 1.5. 0.5 copper, which is low. We want to have at least 1.2. Iron, we have 24. It's also low. We want to have at least 30. And manganese, which is 5.9. We want to have at least 8, from 8 to 10. So yeah, you have all of the micronutrients low. And this is pretty interesting because it's very rare to find soils with low iron in Brazil, but it happens. So all right, let's calculate some ideas for micronutrients. So basically, this is very simple to do. We need to increase 0.75 for zinc. And then I'm going to give you some figures, which are kilograms per hectare of the element, right? So for example, for zinc, we're gonna get the difference. Like we want 1.5 zinc, right? So we need 0.77 of extra zinc. Then we need to multiply this by 2 to get a per hectare value, right? So you need 1.5 kilos of zinc per hectare. right? But this is zinc. If you get zinc sulfate, for example, it's going to have 20 or 25% of zinc in 2025. And then, of course, you have to do the math to calculate how much of the fertilizer you need. Since the values are very small, this is used on a pulverizer. Right? You just pulverize it before planting on the soil, on the whole soil. It's probably going to be good. So you're going to get 1.5 kilos of zinc. You're going to get 1.4 kilos of copper. You get 5 kilos, no, 10 kilos of iron and 4 kilos of manganese. Yeah, you can probably do that. This is, you're going to pulverize it like on the soil, like I said. If you could also, I would recommend that you pay attention to the right after planting. It's probably a good idea to do foliar applications as well. Then you need to be very careful with the concentration of the salts, because you should never do more than 0.3 or 0.5% maximum of concentration. But it would probably be a good idea after planting to pulverize the coffee plants with a micronutrient solution with all the nutrients.
So there's all of these different nutrients can be applied together, and then you recommend to do it to do the recommendation of this of the amendment of these micronutrients after planting.
Yeah, there's two different things. These amounts that I gave you, these would be pulverized on the soil, directly on the soil before planting. Right? Before planting. After, and then this has to be spread in the whole area. You could pulverize it only on where you're gonna plant, right? You just get like a, I don't know, 1 meter wide row and just pulverize it on that row. And then of course you would drop the amount that I gave you by 3, right? Because you would be pulverizing it only in 1/3 of the whole area.
Yeah.
But then after planting, I would still do a foliar application of all the nutrients. And then the foliar application, you just do a concentration of 0.3%. That's considering all of the salts together, right? You can't have 0.3 of each one of them, because then you're going to have a high salt concentration. So you just do 0.3%, considering all the salts combined. And then you just do a foliar application on the whole area, just to make sure that the plants have enough micronutrients in the beginning, because it might take a while before they can actually access the ones that you pulverize. Right, so this leaves us with the phosphorus recommendations, which are, let me get this buddy here. I think it's going to be 80 grams per hectare, but let me confirm. Yeah, it's going to be 80 grams per hectare. 80 grams of phosphorus. $80 grams of phosphorus per hectare. And then of course, how are you going to prepare the soil? Are you going to do, are you going to open furrows, or are you going to open individual nests?
No, it's the plan will be to plow the whole area, and then given on when I'm on site, I'll check if there's compaction, but there probably will be compaction. So also arrange for to deep rip the soil, maybe in the whole plot if that's possible, and or else only every 3 meter on the future tree rows, and then do that for the whole plot. For the whole 4 hectares of the whole 2 systems, both coffee and the vegetable system. Those will be the major things that we plan to do. So yeah.
Yeah, but are you gonna open furrows for planting coffee afterwards? This is how people usually do it, right? They open big furrows, then they put all the fertilizers, close them, and then this is after plowing, after harrowing the fields. They open the furrows, put the fertilizers, close it, and then open the
so like only like the fertilizers of like that you mentioned, only to implement them in the furrows, or do you recommend doing it in the whole area and then just blending in the line?
No, fertilizers. We always do fertilizers in the furrow, in the where we're planting. You could, of course, add something to. Look, I'm except for the micronutrients that I said that you would pulverize on the whole area.
Yeah.
Right, for those quantities. But you could add maybe some manures or something between those, just to get pump up the grass a bit, the cover crops.
Yeah, we were definitely thinking about getting as much available of manure as we can get our hands on to amend the soil more while planting the different plants. But
cool.
I'm not yet sure. It's all going to depend on when we're actually on site, and also the recommendations that are given now and in the coming weeks on how exactly to make different holes for, like, we obviously make different holes, but like we make one big nest and say like every tree row being one complete system. But every plant's gonna be every plant also when it's gonna be planted. Ideally, if we again get available a manure, we also add a little bit for each plant. But beside specifically on the amendments of these extra micronutrients, applying all of the salts that you like in the amounts that you said per hectare on the whole plot. And then afterwards, do you also with these same recommendations, more or less in a lower quantity, also use them while planting, or do you only say it's better just to use the micronutrients in the foliar application after planting and we just spray everything?
Yeah, it's 2 different things that we have to consider here, right? One is soil amending. So for example, whenever we talk about soil amendment, we're talking about the whole area of the plant, right? We want to increase the values of soil attributes. So the micronutrients that I recommended in those amounts, I calculated them to raise the micronutrient levels of the whole area to a certain level, to a certain threshold level, right? And then we have fertilization. Fertilization is when we add nutrients specifically for the plant. So that's calculated how much the plant needs, right? So that's why the foliar application of the micronutrients is independent from the amendment of the soil in micronutrients, right? So they're 2 different independent things. So you can apply the micronutrients at the amount that I told you on the whole area, on the soil, and then after planting, apply a little bit foliar. right? Especially because copper, iron, and manganese are much more efficient when applied via foliar, right? So we're going to increase the levels to get things, a bit better for the plant, but we're also going to give a bit of a start in the plant with the foliar application. And then, if you guys have access to a furrow, I highly recommend opening a furrow so that you can distribute the phosphate that you're going to use, because ideally phosphorus you want to apply it in a reasonable depth so that the plant will deepen its roots, right? If you apply phosphorus since phosphorus is one of the most limiting factors here in tropical soil, if you have concentration of phosphorus on the surface of the soil, the plant will very often just concentrate its roots on the surface of the soil.
Yep.
And this is, of course, something we don't want. So what I usually do for coffee planting is I open a furrow of 40 centimeters. I throw my fertilizer on the bottom of the furrow. Then I close the furrow, level it with the soil, and then I open up individual holes for the coffee plant. And it's important that you don't plant the coffee in the furrow with it open, because otherwise it might be too deep. And this is very common. People will open the furrow, they will plant it in the furrow, and then the coffee plant will be very deep, and then you can't bring the soil back in, because it would cover the stem of the plant, and this is something that you cannot do, you cannot have. So you need to open the furrow, put the fertilizers, close the furrow, and then open up individual holes to plant the coffee. The phosphorus, you need 80 grams per plant, right? 80 grams per plant equals, for example, 500 grams of thermophosphate per plant, or this would be 500 grams of bone meal per plant, or it would be 500. Let's be precise. It would be 533 grams if you're using bone meal, and it would be 500 grams per plant if you're using thermophosphate, which is, you had asked me about suppliers for inputs and all. I'm gonna write here in our chat in Zoom.
Yeah.
How do I do that? There's a chat. There's a company called Termax. They have they're close to Belo Horizonte, and they sell thermophosphate, so you can buy it directly from them. It's probably going to be the cheapest place for you to buy it. And then it solves the problem of the magnesium that I had said, right? Because then you're going to have magnesium available for the plants. Right, so basically we have these three main ingredients, right? You're going to have the thermophosphate, you're gonna have the micronutrients that you're gonna apply in the whole area, and then you're gonna have the foliar application of micronutrients. Then we have the manure that you're going to use. What I would recommend is that you apply, you could, before harrowing, before plowing, you could apply something like 5 to 10 tons of manure per hectare. And then you add, like you said, you add a little bit more for the coffee plant. You know, an extra 3 liters or 4 liters per plant. I think that would be that would already be very, very well fertilized. And that's about it, man. I'm gonna close the soil sample here, but if you have, I can open it again whenever needed.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much it that I recommend for input. Your soil is pretty good. So every nutrient is pretty, at least for the macronutrients, it's pretty well supplied.
There's also like the way that that everybody talks about that specific soil. Everybody that knows the farm and that lives there, they say like, yeah, I remember like we could plant anything there, it would always grow and it was really well. So I was like, yeah, definitely we should first do a soil analysis, so like we really know what's already there. So I'm really excited that now like I have a better plan and what to exactly do. I'll definitely have to recap on seeing the live again to get everything straight, or maybe if you can send me like all the different numbers that you said, like a little small list that I don't miss anything during the live. Maybe that might be easier, because I will surely miss several things. Because it's quite a lot. Like I already had a basic understanding of soil biology and soil analysis, and what it was a broad understanding coming from a broader education in biology. I had several courses that had soil like that talked about soil. But yeah, your lives and this live also, and your lives you do on Instagram are really helpful to get more in depth with the really specific like this really specific necessities of how to read soil analysis and how to tackle the existing problems there. So thank you very well.
Nice. Yeah, I can send you a WhatsApp message after we're done with all the numbers that we said. That's easy. It's helpful. Yeah, the interesting thing of soil analysis is that you really identify the limiting factors, right? And this is an important concept in not only in fertilization, but in farm management. We have another patron coming in here now. Not only in fertilization, but in farm management as a whole, right? You're always gonna have in a farm, when you think of all the operations that are happening, all the tools that you have, all the infrastructure that you have, you're always gonna have your production limited by a specific factor, which will be the most urgent. And we always have to address the most urgent factors. And then once we address that factor, it will stop being the most limiting factor, and then something else is going to be the most limiting factor, and then we have to address that, and then something else is going to become the most limiting factor, and we have to address that. So the interesting thing, and that's for me, that's the main use of soil analysis, is that you get an idea of what are the limiting factors, the probable limiting factors of the soil. Of course, there could be there are other factors that influence it. For example, your soil has a very clear deficiency in micronutrients, right? I could get a soil that doesn't show that deficiency, but in a place that rains a lot, and maybe the soil doesn't have such a high capacity to retain water, and it will water clog very easily, I could have iron and manganese deficiencies because of iron clogging. So, the soil analysis gives us an idea of the probable limiting factors. But there's other factors that are going to impact that as well, of course. but still it gives us a very clear idea. And it gives us, for example, in your case, it's like you cannot use lime in your soil. It's like you should not, the soil should not see lime. The soil should not see wood ashes in high quantities because your pH is already very high. And coffee is a plant from acidic soils. It's very, very sensitive to micronutrient deficiencies. You already have a micronutrient deficiency in the soil. So it could be like if you add lime to the soil, it could be a big problem for you. So yeah, identifying limiting factors and then addressing them. And of course, this is only the start, right? This gives us an idea on how to start, but then you need to monitor your soil. You need to monitor the development of the plant, and then do adjustments accordingly. And of course, knowing that as you grow your soil biology, as you increase biodiversity in the soil, the range of soil attributes that is acceptable for plant growth widens a lot. So if we would take, for example, a completely dead soil, maybe you need that, where is it? You need those seconds. Oh, here it is. Maybe you're gonna need those like 30 or 50 ppm of phosphorus, right? Considering a completely dead soil, you need that available for proper plant growth. But as you develop soil biology, maybe if you have 20 and not 30, that's already going to be enough for plant growth because you have a good mycorrhiza network that's increasing the root, explore the area of soil or the volume of soil explored by roots. They're accessing phosphorus that wouldn't be available for the plant. So you start widening the range of what's acceptable for plant growth, both for minimum or the critical limit for essential elements, and also the critical limits for toxic elements, right? So the more organic matter, the more soil biology, the more you widen the limits, the more the plant becomes tolerant to harder conditions, let's say.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. People in YouTube, if you guys have questions, just you can ask them. If you're watching the recording and not live, you can also drop questions in the comments. And then, like I mentioned, we will have a Q&A exclusive to patrons, probably next week or the week afterwards. I would recommend also, guys, everyone who is in the patron community, there is a pinned post in the community with all of the extra content that we've produced for patrons over the year or over the years. So there's a bunch of webinars, and one of the webinars, you can see the last one here, is a webinar on interpreting soil analysis. So that's a pretty good complement for this live. So definitely go and watch it before we have the Q&A, so that we can so that you guys can get as much questions as you'd like in on that topic. Also, there's a live I did with Matt from What's Ripening, and I helped him out with his soil analysis. So you guys could also look for that to start getting acquainted with soil analysis as a whole. And then, Peter, it's also a good opportunity for you in this next week or 2 weeks to you know, wrap your head around this discussion we had and see whatever doubts you might have, and maybe already start searching for suppliers, call suppliers, so that you can, you know, if you have any doubts when we have this Q&A, I can help you out with, you know, directing.
That's definitely the plan. Yeah, even though I'm like next coming 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be more focused on a little bit of holidays and a little bit of traveling. But yeah, like everyone here in the community and a lot of people outside there, like we're all like kind of focused. And when anybody asks us anything about what we are passionate about, like you open a book, and so I will definitely not stop thinking about the project and trying to get everything arranged for when I arrive in Brazil. But I thank you very much for all different information up till now. But I'm definitely gonna keep on asking a lot of things, because there's still so many questions that will keep coming.
Cool. All right, man. So if there's not any further questions, we can wrap this up.
Yeah, from me at the moment, not specifically. Besides the ones that I sent you specifically for suppliers, because the only access I have at the moment is through internet, and I try to look up from here. If I look up on the internet from here in Belgium, or look it up from in Bolivia or in Brazil, it probably stays the same what results I see on Mercado Libre. But if they're like if you know more locally or in the region producers of coffee plants of specific, like Gennaro already said, like the producer of banana pups in Lagos is a really good source of all different ways of people that supply seeds in the region. That maybe better than just try to contact some random person through Mercado Libre.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to help you with coffee, but it's because I know coffee suppliers in Bahia, but in Minas Gerais you're probably not going to have any problem finding suppliers, because it's a big coffee region.
Yeah.
But I will send you a link to a supplier of or a couple of suppliers of cover crop seeds, which you can buy directly from. The fertilizers, I gave you the name of the phosphate factory, right? You can check that out. You're gonna find their contact in the internet very easily.
Yeah.
And then for micronutrients, it's very easy. You can just go to any fertilizer shop. They're gonna have all the micronutrients. You know, if it's a specialized fertilizer shop, they're gonna have all the nutrients, no doubt. So I'm gonna already do that so that I don't forget. Look, you have one is brseeds.com. And the other one is Caissara.
Yeah.
Already found it?
Yeah, I BR seeds. I encountered it already, and I already put it in my in my plan on Excel, because I noticed them offering it at good deals compared to the other information that I found. So yeah, definitely good to see that at least a little bit of the effort I made on researching through internet, like it gave good results.
Cool. All right, man. So let's wrap it up.
Okay.
And we'll don't forget Oh yeah, Ellen is mentioned something here in in YouTube. He said, "Don't forget boron," and that's well remembered because I mentioned in the beginning that we don't have, we didn't get a value for boron, right? The lab didn't send the results for boron,
Yeah.
and so you should definitely apply boron. And then boron has to be applied in that amendment phase when you're going to apply it in the soil, right? In the whole soil. I would recommend that you apply, it's hard without knowing exactly the situation of the soil, but I would apply 2 kilos of boron, which is kind of guaranteed. Boron leaches very easily. So I would definitely apply, 2 kilos of boron per hectare.
And all of these soils you recommend like pulverize directly on the soil, mixing them, or mixing them in water or something else?
In water. No, you're gonna mix them in water and then you pulverize it on the soil.
Yeah. Okay.
And then for that, you could you don't have to worry so much about concentration because you're not gonna have any plants, right, on the field, so it's not a big problem. Whenever you have plants, you need to be very careful because they will burn plants due to salinity. And but yeah, you can usually when it's when you're gonna pulverize in the soil, you're gonna use anywhere from like 2 to 5% of concentration. It should be. It's just important that you have enough volume of water to spread evenly on the field, and that you have you don't try to concentrate too much because then eventually you go past the maximum solubility of the salt, and then it precipitates in the bottom of the pulverizer.
Yeah. Okay. And then just to recap, when you talked about the phosphor in at the beginning, you said 80 grams per hectare, and then later on you changed it to that. But so like then you change it to plant. So it's 80 grams per plant, and that corresponds to the 500 grams thermophosphate per plant.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Yeah, I said per hectare, but that was just a mental lapse.
Yeah, you mentioned so many different valuable, so it's like it's easily that you miss a few or like mispronounce a few.
Exactly. One thing that let's just take the opportunity to wrap it up. One thing which can happen when we have low phosphorus, such as in your case, and since phosphorus, the ideal is that we apply it we apply a big quantity at once, because since phosphorus doesn't move so much in the soil profile, applying it afterwards as a cover for, just on the surface of the soil, the efficiency is very low. That's why we apply a lot of phosphorus in the beginning. But it is important to know that this high phosphorus application can have temporary effect on iron and manganese absorption. And then we have a very strong chlorosis of the coffee plants on the younger leaves. It can happen. And so that's why I recommend people already have the micronutrients on the farm
ready,
and be ready to do a foliar application after planting. If the leaves start turning yellow, apply especially iron and manganese. It goes away by itself, but there's no reason why we don't, we can help the plant out a bit in order to not make it stall the growth. So this is something just to pay attention to. All right, guys. So let's wrap it up. Peter, thanks a lot for participating and opening up the project to everybody and telling a bit about what your plans are, and for sharing your soil analysis with us. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch on WhatsApp, and soon we're gonna have a Q&A to answer any doubts that might have been left.
Yeah.
All right. So cheers, people from YouTube. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see each other soon. You guys have a great week. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
See you, Peter. Have